The bank turned him down on a Tuesday. By Saturday, the first wall was up. That was how it worked in black neighborhoods across the South and the Midwest during the 1950s. The loan officer said no, and the family said fine. Number 14 gave families something no bank ever offered. Number 7 is the reason entire blocks in cities like Detroit and Memphis still stand. And number 3 explains how whole communities rose from open fields with no permits and no apologies. Hit subscribe because here are 25 ways black families built their own homes when banks said no. Number 25. Building one room at a time. A family in rural Alabama did not wait until they could afford a whole house. They started with one room, 4 walls, a roof, a door. The family slept there, cooked there, lived there while the second room went up the following spring. By the mid-1950s, the house had 3 rooms and a porch. No construction loan, no contractor, just a slow, patient addition every time enough cash came in from the harvest or the factory shift. The house grew as the money grew, and not a single payment went to a lender. Number 24. Paying cash for the land. Before a single nail went in, a family needed dirt to stand on. Black families in Mississippi, Georgia, and the Carolinas bought land outright, in cash. A 1/4 acre here, a 1/2 acre there, purchased from a landowner willing to sell at the back of the property line, or from a black neighbor with more acreage than heirs. No deed of trust, no title insurance, just a handshake and a receipt folded into a Bible. The lots were often irregular, sometimes landlocked, sometimes low enough to flood. But they were owned, and that was the only thing that mattered. Number 23. Cinder block walls. Lumber yards in the Jim Crow South did not always sell to black buyers, and when they did, the markup was steep. So families turned to cinder blocks. They were cheap, widely available, and a man who had never framed a wall could learn to lay block in a weekend. Across Birmingham, Jackson, and Shreveport, cinder block houses went up fast. The walls held heat in winter and stayed cool through the summer. A trowel, a level, a string line, and patience. Those gray block houses with the flat roofs became a signature of black self-sufficiency across the post-war South. Number 22. Salvaged lumber from teardowns. When a building came down anywhere in the county, black men showed up with trucks before the dust settled. Old schoolhouses, barns, shuttered churches. The wood was free or nearly free, and most of it was old-growth pine or oak harder than anything a modern lumberyard could stock. Families pulled nails one by one, sorted planks by length, and stacked them under a tarp until they had enough to frame a room. In Memphis and East St. Louis, entire houses were built from salvaged material without a single new board. Number 21. The community house raising. On a Saturday morning, a dozen men from the neighborhood, the church, or the lodge showed up at a lot with hammers, saws, and their own lunch packed in paper bags. By sundown, the frame of a house was standing. Nobody sent an invoice. Nobody expected anything except the same favor returned when their turn came. In black communities from rural Georgia to the south side of Chicago, house raisings followed the same unspoken rules. You showed up, you worked until the light was gone, and when your family needed a roof, the same men appeared at your lot. Every house that went up without a bank was proof that the system had not stopped them. Number 20. Mixing concrete by hand. There was no cement truck pulling up to a black family's lot in rural Mississippi. The father, his brothers, and sometimes his sons mixed concrete in wheelbarrows with shovels and garden hoses. Sand, gravel, Portland cement, and water turned over and over until the consistency was right. They poured footings one section at a time, leveling with a board and a carpenter's eye. A single foundation could take 2 full weekends of mixing and pouring in the heat, but when it cured, it held. Here is what made all of this necessary. Starting in the mid-1930s, federal agencies drew maps of American cities and shaded black neighborhoods in red. That practice, known as redlining, told banks exactly where not to lend. A black family in a red zone could have steady income, a clean record, and a reliable job, and the answer was still no. The Veterans Administration offered home loans to millions of returning soldiers after World War II, but black veterans were denied at rates that stripped the program of any pretense of equality. The GI Bill built white suburbs, it skipped black ones. So black families did what they had always done when a door was closed. They found another way. Number 19. Black-owned savings and loan associations. When white banks refused to lend, black communities built their own. Savings and loan associations chartered by and for black depositors operated in cities like Durham, Atlanta, Richmond, and Chicago. A family deposited small amounts over years, and when they had enough equity, they could borrow against it for a home. The interest rates were fair. The loan officer lived on the same street, attended the same church, and understood that a janitor working double shifts was a safer bet than any credit score could measure. They were not just financial institutions. They were acts of collective defiance. Number 18. Buying on contract. In cities across the Midwest and Northeast, a black family that could not get a mortgage had one other option: a land contract. The seller held the deed while the buyer made monthly payments, often at inflated prices and steep interest. Miss a single payment, and the seller kept the house and every dollar already paid. It was a raw deal, and everyone knew it. But for families in Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, who had been shut out of every other path, it was the only deal on the table. The ones who survived the contract owned their homes outright, and the cost was measured in years of overtime and meals that stretched a single chicken across a week. Number 17. Trading labor instead of money. A man who could lay pipe traded his skill with a man who could wire a panel. A carpenter framed a neighbor's addition in exchange for a mason building his chimney. No cash changed hands. In black neighborhoods across the South, this barter system made construction possible for families who had more skill than savings. An electrician who could not afford a plumber did not go without plumbing. He found the plumber, shook his hand, and both families moved forward together. Number 16. Church building funds. The Sunday collection plate did more than keep the lights on. In black churches during the 1950s, a portion of the tithes went into a building fund that members could borrow from to buy land or materials. The terms were simple: borrow what you need, pay it back when you can, and help the next family when your house is done. Pastors kept the books. Deacons approved the loans. The collateral was your word and your presence in the pew every Sunday morning. Number 15. Women's savings clubs. They met at kitchen tables with envelopes and notebooks. 5 women, sometimes 10, sometimes 20, each putting the same amount into a pot every week. One woman took the full amount home each cycle. When her turn came back around, she had already built the porch or bought the windows or paid for the roofing tin. These rotating savings circles went by different names. Some called them rounds. In Caribbean neighborhoods, the word was susu. The mechanics were the same everywhere: pooled savings, rotating payouts, zero interest, zero paperwork, and total trust. These clubs financed kitchens, bathrooms, and second stories all across Black America. Number 14. Fraternal orders and lodge loans. The Masons, the Elks, the Oddfellows, the Knights of Pythias. In the 1950s, Black fraternal orders were not just social clubs with handshakes and ceremonies. They were financial institutions with treasuries, bylaws, and loan committees that operated with more discipline than many county banks in the South. A member in good standing could borrow from the lodge to buy building materials, And the interest rate was set by men who sat across from him at every meeting and understood exactly what that lumber was for. In cities like Nashville, Houston, and Baltimore, fraternal lodges funded dozens of homes every year. The process had its own formality. A member submitted a written request to the finance committee. The committee reviewed his standing, his employment record, and his building plan. If approved, the funds were dispersed in stages tied to construction milestones: foundation poured, walls up, roof on. The lodges also provided something no bank ever could: skilled labor. A chapter might count carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and roofers among its members, and they showed up on build days because the brotherhood required it. A man did not just borrow money from his lodge. He borrowed hands, tools, trucks, and entire weekends. The repayment schedule was flexible. A brother who lost his job was given time. A brother who fell ill was carried by the chapter until he recovered. Default was rare, not because of harsh penalties, but because failing the lodge meant failing every man who had helped pour your foundation and frame your walls. Walking away from that debt meant walking away from the only institution that had believed in you when the bank across town would not even let you through the door. The houses that went up in these neighborhoods looked nothing like the subdivisions spreading across white America. There were no matching mailboxes, no cookie-cutter floor plans. Each home was shaped by whoever built it: the carpenter who knew how to frame but not how to plumb, the mason who made the walls twice as thick because that was how his father taught him. The doors did not always hang straight, the windows were not always centered, but the houses were theirs, and that mattered more than symmetry ever could. Number 13. Building on family land. Across the rural South, black families held on to land that had been in the family since Reconstruction. A grandfather who had acquired a few acres in the 1880s might have 5 grandchildren building houses on that same plot by the 1950s. The land was never sold. It passed from generation to generation through word of mouth, handwritten wills, or simply the understanding that this soil belonged to the family. 3 houses on one lot was not crowding. Property taxes on undivided land stayed low, and no bank was involved. The land was the foundation long before the concrete was poured. Number 12. Sharing one roof across 3 generations. A newly married couple in the 1950s did not always start with their own house. They moved in with parents, saved every spare dollar, and when they had enough, they built an addition or started a new structure next door. Grandparents watched children while parents worked. Parents contributed income while grandparents contributed the land. Household expenses were split so many ways that every dollar stretched further than it would under a standalone mortgage. When the young couple finally moved into their own place, it was paid for in full. Number 11. The shotgun house. 1 room wide, 3 or 4 rooms deep, with every door lined up so a breeze moved straight through on a summer night. The shotgun house was the most efficient design a family with limited materials could build. Fewer load-bearing walls, less lumber, less roofing than any other floor plan of comparable square footage. In New Orleans, Memphis, and Birmingham, whole streets of shotgun houses went up in black neighborhoods. A carpenter could frame one in days. The layout was simple enough that a man who had never built anything larger than a shed could follow a neighbor's example. Number 10. Scrap from the railroad and the factory floor. Black men who worked for the railroads and the steel mills had access to materials that would otherwise end up in a scrap heap. Cross ties too worn for track, but sound for a foundation support. Sheet metal cutoffs large enough to patch a roof. Wooden pallets that could be broken down and reused as framing. None of this was stolen. It was surplus, offered by foremen who knew exactly what their workers were building on weekends. Number 9. The envelope system for building costs. A family building without a loan needed a budget, and the budget lived in a row of envelopes in the kitchen drawer. 1 for nails, 1 for cement, 1 for roofing, 1 for windows. Every payday, cash was divided into the envelopes according to what was needed next. When the cement envelope was full, the family bought cement. If the money was not in the envelope, the purchase waited. Every component of the house was paid for before it was installed. Number 8. Black contractors and tradesmen who worked for their own people. In every black community of any size, there were men who built houses for a living during the week and built houses for their neighbors on the weekend. Licensed contractors, master carpenters, self-taught electricians who charged their neighbors a fraction of what they billed on commercial jobs. Some charged nothing at all. These tradesmen formed informal networks, referring families to one another, pooling equipment, and sharing knowledge about local building codes. They were the backbone of black home ownership in every city where the front door of the bank stayed shut. Number 7. Sweat equity. This is the idea that holds every other item on this list together. A man could not walk into a bank and put down collateral, so he put down labor. His own back, his own weekends, his own skills, and when his skills ran short, he learned new ones on the job. In cities like Detroit, a factory worker would clock out on Friday afternoon, drive straight to his lot, and work until dark on Sunday night. He poured his own concrete, cut his own lumber, hung his own drywall, and ran his own wiring, learning from library books, from neighbors, and from trial and error that sometimes meant tearing out a wall and starting over. The house took years to finish. Nobody cared how long it took. Sweat equity was not a metaphor. It was a literal transaction. Every hour a man spent hammering nails was an hour he did not need to earn wages to pay someone else. If you could do it yourself, the house cost materials only. If you could not do it yourself, the house cost materials plus labor, and labor was the expense that put home ownership out of reach for families already stretched thin. Women worked alongside. They painted walls, sanded floors, mixed mortar, and carried cinder blocks from the stack to the wall line. Children old enough to lift a hammer were put to work on Saturday mornings. A house built on sweat equity was a family project in the most literal sense, and every member of that family could walk through the finished rooms and point to a wall, a floor, a set of cabinets their own hands had shaped. Banks measured value in appraisals and interest rates. These families measured it in blisters, sore muscles, and the satisfaction of sleeping under a roof that no institution on earth had any claim to. Number 6. Digging foundations and wells by hand. Before the concrete could go in, the ground had to come out. In rural areas with no access to heavy equipment, that meant shovels, picks, and labor that left a man unable to close his fists for days. Families dug their own foundation trenches and their own wells. A well could take weeks depending on the depth of the water table. When the hole was deep enough and the water came in clear, the family had a house site and a water supply, both built without a single check written to a contractor. Number 5. Adding a room when a new baby came. A house built in stages did not stop growing after the family moved in. When a child arrived, the family added a room. When a relative moved up from the south, they added another. In neighborhoods across Atlanta, Chicago, and Newark, you could read a family's history in the shape of their house. The original two-room structure was still visible at the core, but the additions wrapped around it like growth rings on a tree. Each addition was built with whatever materials were available at the time. The house was accumulated, and every addition told its own chapter. Number 4. Drawing the plan on the kitchen table. There was no architect. There was a pencil, a ruler, and a kitchen table where a husband and wife sat down after the children went to bed and sketched the rooms they needed. The bedroom went here, the kitchen went there. The bathroom went against the back wall where the plumbing run was shortest. These hand-drawn plans were passed to brothers and uncles who added notes in the margins and pointed out problems before the first shovel broke ground. Number 3. Buying lots in all-black subdivisions. In the late 1940s and through the 1950s, black developers in cities like Houston, Atlanta, Dallas and Los Angeles, began buying large tracts of land on the outskirts of town and dividing them into affordable lots marketed exclusively to black families. These were practical, no-frills subdivisions where a family could buy a lot at a fair price, paid in installments to a black-owned land company, and build at their own pace. The streets were unpaved, there was no city water, no sewer connection. Families hauled water in jugs until the pipes were finally extended to their block. But the lots were affordable, the terms were honest, and the families who bought them were building something that mattered more than infrastructure. A community where every neighbor understood exactly what it took to be there. Over time, these subdivisions became established neighborhoods. The families organized to demand city services. They petitioned for paved roads, water hookups, streetlights, and bus routes. They built churches on corner lots and schools followed. What started as an empty field with surveyor stakes became a neighborhood with a name, an identity, and a population of homeowners who owed nothing to any lending institution. Some of these neighborhoods are still there today, handed down to grandchildren who may not know that the street they live on was once a dirt path where their grandmother made her monthly payment on a lot nobody else wanted. These subdivisions were the physical foundation of black middle-class life in cities across the country, built by families who were told they did not qualify for the American dream and decided to build their own version from the ground up. Number 2. Teaching the next generation to build. A father who built his own house did not keep that knowledge locked in his hands. His children learned by watching, then by holding, then by doing. A 12-year-old who had spent 3 summers handing his father nails and mixing mortar knew more about construction than most adults who had never picked up a hammer. The daughters learned too. They painted, they caulked, they measured and cut trim boards. When those children started families of their own, they already knew how to build a house from the foundation up. The knowledge was the real inheritance. Number 1. Owning the house free and clear. No mortgage, no lien, no monthly statement in the mailbox. When the last nail was driven, the family owned everything. The land, the structure, and every piece of material inside it. There was no 30-year repayment schedule. There was no risk of foreclosure if a job disappeared. The house was theirs the day it was finished. That kind of ownership meant stability that could not be revoked. It meant something real to leave behind. Every item on this list, from the hand-mixed concrete to the church building fund to the lots on the edge of town, led here. A black family standing on a porch they built with their own hands, on land they owned outright, in a country that told them they could not have it. They built it anyway. Not one of these houses came with a welcome mat from the real estate industry. If you grew up in a home like this, or if your parents or grandparents built one, you already know what every item on this list is really about. It was never just about the house. Share this with someone who grew up in one of these homes, and tell us in the comments which of these hit closest to yours.